Okay, so our topic today is on burnout or compassion fatigue. And I figured it would be a good topic because of us all being in social work and probably being familiar with it. So I am actually going to show you all a short video. You will give me just a moment. But I also wanted to say, again, it's something that we're familiar with. Maybe we have observed it. We have been through it ourselves. And so today we're going to hopefully be discussing it and being open about our past, a little bit of our present, even if you currently have the state of burnout, and how we're going to work through that to learn some better coping skills as a team. In just a moment, I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a moment. Technical difficulties. Can you all see it okay? Okay.
I can't hear anything.
I can't hear anything either.
Yeah,
You can't hear it?
No.
Oh
No.
my. Well, that's not good at all.
When I tell people what I do for a living, they often respond by saying things like, "Bless your soul, that must be difficult." And my all-time favorite, "It's so nice to see someone not working for the money." I'm a social worker. I tend to the wounds of people crucified to circumstance, carry hope and band-aids in my briefcase, share my own scars for street cred. I work with kids who see their probation officers more than their fathers. They wear sagging pants in their parents' mistakes, introduce themselves as accidents waiting to happen. They are a Hollywood casting director's wet dream. Tattooed with the temper, do-rag D-boys, boys in the hood, mi vida loca. They speak in sign language because they have been taught they are voiceless. Marginalization is the chip on their shoulder. It is so heavy they walk with the limp, pass it off as swag. Their fingers, more familiar with pipes than pencils. Eye-smoked clothes paint their worldview the color of devils as they search for God or anyone else they can just look up to. Each one has a story. Emilio wants to change, so he keeps a lucky penny in his pants pocket along with the quarter I gave him to call with whenever he is in need. In the desperation of his 15-year-old eyes, I see more potential than an idea Rivera never manifested on a canvas. He makes the city his, scribes pieces of his soul into windows, not knowing his pain is as transparent as the glass, sprays a masked moniker underneath street lamps, so he always shines brighter than the darkness of his insecurities. He left his self-esteem next to a cigarette butt at the bottom of a bottle bought by relatives who see no problem feeding fires. He screams in spontaneous combustion, but believes nobody's listening, so he commits another crime. He likes going to court because there, at least he knows someone is paying attention to his sentences. I am his social worker attempting to make sense of his syntax. He didn't fall through the cracks, they swallowed him. I've seen it happen in broad daylight. Sun turning the other cheek, cowering behind the clouds, concrete quicksand traps you'd like Venus happiness fly. Homies who claim to have backs front, offering no help. And so many of our kids are sinking. Emilio asks me for direction, but there's only one way to go from where he is. I show him his heartbeat's his compass. We look at the scars on his psyche. I ask if he's ready to replace them with dirt underneath his fingernails. He asks me how he is supposed to escape the sand. I remind him he cannot ask for one to guide his footsteps if he's not willing to move his feet first. I speak in cliches, talk of butterflies and phoenixes and of hip-hop and so many ugly things that have bloomed into beauty. I speak in truths. I tell him I don't know if things will be okay. I show him statistics are stalking him in prisons, at housewarming parties. I tell him the streets, they don't change, but I know that people do. Hope is not a helium-filled balloon that has slipped from our fingertips. We do not have to watch potential float away. I am a social worker. I work with kids who learn to spell stigma before their first names, but each one is an artist learning to draw their own conclusions. Their pencils are heavy burdens built without erasers on purpose, because sometimes the best thing you can do is not go back. I am a social worker, and no, I don't do it for the money. I do it simply because I still believe in people, and I really hope that you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and all of you still do too.
What'd y'all think of that?
I love stuff like that.
That was really cool. I liked that because I really felt like it spoke to kind of why a lot of people got into social work. So any other thoughts on the video? What's your thoughts on, his description of his compassionate view of social work?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the thing I liked most about the video is how he was just paying attention to how kids feel and that they see, like social workers or whatever more often than their own parents and everything. Just like paying attention to that was really cool.
Did any of y'all else have any thoughts on his descriptive, compassionate view?
He was very relatable, and he knew his clients very well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Did you all, when you all got into social work, feel kind of that passionate about your idea of helping others?
Yeah, I would say so. Oh, now I feel an echo.
So why did you all get into social work?
That's a very good question.
I feel like
yeah, it's a tough question. I feel like for me, it's kind of like a two-parter, I guess, because I've always had like an interest in. Well, I mean, I know social workers can do all kinds of stuff, but I've always had an interest in therapy, like for years, and so yeah, I don't know. I do, enjoy helping other people in that way, in talking about stuff and just listening to people. And also just really interested like in psychology and everything. So that's kind of why it's a two-parter. Like I'm really interested in it just as, as itself. And then also I do want to help other people because because I know what some of that is like. So I feel like, I'm better able to help other people because of it. I don't know.
How about you, Samantha?
Well, I started out as a graphic design major. So I wanted to work for nonprofits and all that stuff. But I really didn't want to be stuck behind a desk. Like I really wanted to get out and help people like in person. And so I had my own inspirations and kind of got led into social work. So
Okay. Angel or Ashley, do y'all have any thoughts on how you ended up in social work? I know that something caused you all to want to dive in because you're moving in the direction of obtaining your master's of social work. And it just seems like that you're making a further commitment. So do you all kind of remember what got you started in social work in the first place? Why you decided?
I'll let Ashley go first. Mine's a long story.
So I'm kind of similar to Sam in that I started with a different major when I was going through undergrad. I thought I wanted to be a chef, so I was going to culinary school.
Wow.
And I don't know why, but that first year I took a intro to social work class, and it was just with a community college, but we had to do our service learning hours, like 25, 30, just something small. And I really thought this is where I need to be, because in our little country high school, it was either you were a teacher or a nurse if they were encouraging you to go on to college. So nobody ever said social work was a job or that was an option. So I learned more about the profession when I started college, and I switched my major because I really wanted to find a way to help people, and I didn't want to be a nurse because I can't deal with the hands-on bodily fluids thing, which is ironic because for the last 7 years, I guess, I've been a social worker in healthcare instead of mental health. So I really just wanted kids, of course, had a special place in my heart, but also the geriatric population. I felt like those are the two that it's like you only had a voice if you were somewhere in between that, and people would actually listen to you. But if you were on either end of that spectrum of life, nobody really cared what you had to say. And it's strange that on both of those ends of life, it's like people kind of treat you the same, that you don't know what you're talking about. So I wanted to be able to help those people. And I just kind of really not so much the therapy part of it, but just meeting people where they are and connecting with them on a level of not having specific goals necessarily of this is exactly the boxes that we're going to check, but what they feel like those boxes need to be. That's a big thing to me, instead of everybody kind of fits in the same box. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's a short version of why I became a social worker, because I just wanted to be able to help people the way they wanted to be helped.
Good. I love how
And
you
I
had
condensed mine.
well, I love how you looked at it, that there was a view of how do I help, and you really started to seek that out. And it sounds like all of you all have decided that that's something that interests you, is having that hands-on work with maybe not fully identified a specific population, but they're ones you're very interested in supporting. That's great. Angel?
Okay, I said mine was kind of long, and whenever I went to get my bachelor's, I really had it in my head that I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to educate, and I did like the kindergarten through 6th grade age frame. Well, when I got in there and started doing all my practicum and all my stuff real fast, I was like, this just doesn't feel right for me. I feel like I need to do something else. And for a long time, I still worked in like the Head Starts and different places like that, and I just never really felt right, like where I needed to be. And finally, a job came open with like this in-home service, Health Connect America, and my friend Kristen helped me get a job there. And I did so well with helping people in home, whether it be kids, people struggling with addiction, dealing with going into the homes and doing counseling and stuff, and helping the foster parents kind of get a better understanding of the child. All that stuff just really clicked for me. And then after that job, I went to Life and Health Services, and it was just complete addiction recovery. So I got to do case management the entire time I was there, which was 3 years. And then by the end of that year, I was like, I want to do more. I want to do therapy. A lot of times, even though I was doing case management and linking people up, I was also sitting there doing therapy with them, not legally or whatever, but I was still listening to their problems and trying to help them come up with, how to fix some of this stuff or, different stuff like that. So I wanted to do more, and I knew to be able to do more, I would have to go back and get my degree, my master's. So that's kind of what led me into that. My brother also is a recovering addict, and I felt like he never fully got the support that he needed. And that's another thing that kind of drove me into having such a passion for addiction, because I felt like he was so neglected and everybody just wanted to judge and didn't really want to get in there and try to understand him. And so whenever I got the chance to do the opposite of how my brother was treated, I went all in. So.
That's a great story of showing your progression and how you got here today and how your commitment level was raised by getting your master's. And I think we can all relate, even though our stories are a little bit different, but we all have very relatable views that we really want to have that impact that we can see.
Mm-hmm.
And I am wondering, are you all on the evidence-based interpersonal practice, or are you all in the on the other side of your program?
Evidence-based.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm evidence-based too.
Okay. Ashley, are you evidence-based as well?
EBIP all the way.
So we all have a lot in common. I have, I'll just do a very brief overview of mine. Is I had the cliche, I want to help people. And from a very young age, I knew I wanted to do something specifically with hands-on with people. And I didn't have a specific age group, but I knew that I was going to need to go to college for that. And I actually took a class in high school to see if nursing was a plausible option, because there's a lot of nurses in my family. Decided that was not my thing. So then I just was trying to figure out, where is this going to take me? And I ended up doing an internship at the Department of Children's Services and fell in love with it. And I actually worked there for 16 years, and I loved it, most of it. But then I knew that I still wanted to develop, sort of in the vein of Angel, of being able to provide a different therapeutic intervention than maybe I'm able to as a case manager. And that's how I ended up in my master's program. So it's great to hear, even though we come from different locations and different backgrounds of how we ended up here, we're all kind of in the same view of life. So we talked a little bit about why we got into social work. And I'm not sure if you all are aware of this, but just a little bit of information. I'm sure you all are very well aware that the increased demand for social services is just starting to skyrocket. And I think it's projected to grow about 19% from 2016 to 2026, which is much faster than pretty much any other occupation. And that's because we can go into multiple areas. Ashley, you said yours was more in the healthcare field. Angel, you wanted to do more in line with working with IOP. And Samantha and Paige, you all didn't say specifically. Paige, you wanted to do more therapeutic psychology side of it. So I wanted to.
I don't know anymore.
You don't know anymore?
I wanted to do therapeutic, but now I'm in the hospital, so.
And that's very interesting you mentioned that, because I have found in my field placement, it's completely different than what I used to do. because I'm working with adults, because my initial thing is I want to continue to work with young people, and now I absolutely love working with older people. So that's a very good point, Sam. And I apologize if I called you Sam and you don't like that. Would it surprise you to know that social workers, the average length of a postmaster social work experience is only about 7.5 years?
I hope that that's not true, because I'll still be paying on my student loans at that point. So I hope to work long enough to at least pay them off.
That means I'm not going to make it long enough to get my loans forgiven.
And that's not necessarily in one place. That's usually averaging about 2.5 years in one place and 3 to 3.5 years in another place.
That's even worse.
And I actually got that information from the Journal of Psychology and Sociology and Social Welfare. So one of the things I told you all the topic tonight was about burnout and compassion fatigue. So in doing some of the research, compassion fatigue and burnout is one of the major reasons that the life of a social worker is exponentially lower than one would expect. So are you all familiar with burnout or compassion fatigue? So we are familiar with it. So Herbert Freudenberger, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct. He was a psychologist in the 70s, actually coined the phrase burnout, I think. And he described it as a severe stress condition that leads to severe physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. And it's much worse than ordinary fatigue.
You're depressed and make heavy on your
well, so it challenges us to cope with stress and handle day-to-day responsibilities. So how have you all experienced burnout, if you have? And sometimes, you experience burnout by what I kind of call secondhand burnout, where it's kind of like a smoker. If you have secondhand smoke, you still can get cancer. So even though you may not be the one who is burnt out or experiencing compassion fatigue, if you're around a lot of that, it starts to kind of wear off on you as well. Have you all ever experienced any of that, either secondhand or firsthand?
So I had this one case when I was a case manager, and it just sucked the soul out of me. Like, my fiance can tell you, this case, like, I cried over it all the time. It took up so much time. Like, it was priority number one always. Like, my supervisor would always get on me. I would have to push all my other cases to the side because of this case. I would have to spend like late nights out because of this case. Like, at a certain point, like, I was just so burnt out because of this case. And like, ultimately it was that case that told me I was not gonna last at that agency. So yeah, I felt it, and it's like you're just so exhausted. You don't want to do anything. You're not really you.
You're not really you. That's a really powerful statement. So did you feel that you kind of lost a sense of who you were because the case itself overtook, even though you wanted to help other people, what your desire was stripped away because you were so happy, you had to be so hyper focused on someone that took so much more of your energy than they should have?
Yeah, pretty much. Like at a certain point, you're just like, you would rather go home than help anybody. Like you'd rather put all your files away, leave for the day. Like every phone call that would come in would make you cringe. You know, like to this day, if I hear the ringtone for my work tone, like my work phone, I I instantly have anxiety.
Mm.
You know, like it it's just not fun.
So it sounds like you definitely had some compassion fatigue and burnout, and a lot of mental stress that came from it, and that you weren't having the support in place that you needed from supervision to make sure that you were being effective as a case manager and still feeling supported yourself.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That sounds like a bit of an extreme case, that unfortunately I think is all too common.
Well, that was a very extreme case that I was working on. If I could give you the details, all your mouths would drop. Like,
I'm sure Caviandra has some cases that if she could tell us, all of our mouths would drop with BCS.
I'm sure. I feel like Caviandra and I could talk and we would just relate so much because we've both been case managers.
Yes, yes. How about you, Paige?
It's weird because I mean, I haven't like been in any field. Like this is only my second, semester. I've been straight through school this whole time, so I'm kind of new in general. So I'm trying to think as far as burnout from social work.
So,
Uh,
so
yeah.
sometimes you can even relate, that you can have mommy fatigue. You can have fatigue from your life being so overly unbalanced with things like your master's program, um, and field placement, and so much going on that maybe you lose the love of what you're doing because you're so overwhelmed in all of it.
Because I was gonna say like I feel like most of my stress just comes from my personal life. I there've been some stressful things like in my internships, but nothing that bad. So really, I I feel like I recently went through some burnout. But I feel like last year was a little bit more clearly like burnout because normally I was working interning at a assisted living, and I don't know. I feel like I'm a pretty like empathic person. I feel like I am, but I could just tell that I literally because I was so exhausted from life, I just literally felt a difference in empathy. It was really interesting. But yeah, so I feel like yeah, most of the stress just for me comes from like just school and life and like all different weird things that go on. And I feel like so for I don't know, for my self-care or whatever to just try to counteract that, I feel like I'd have to spend more time on the personal stuff.
Okay.
So yeah.
It sounds like you're kind of pretty aware of yourself, and even acknowledging when you're supposed to be giving of yourself with helping with interventions, that you knew that maybe you were not in the best headspace because of other stressors in your life. So it sounds like there was some fatigue in the mental side for you, and maybe even exhausted physically.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's very relatable. I think a lot of times when we're talking about social work, we give and give and give and give, and you have a little taste of the social work side, but I would venture to say that all of you all are social workers in your own personal lives at some point.
Yep.
And I'm sure probably you all have found yourself practicing some of your skills on other in members of your family or your partners. And
Oh yeah.
Angel, Ashley, have you all experienced it either by observing? And if you don't mind, if let me go back real quick to Paige. Did you notice in your internships any kind of what you would suspect would be compassion fatigue or burnout in the setting you were in by the counselors that were there or the other workers you saw?
I'm trying to think. I feel like I was always able to, like, because I didn't actually like, I did a lot of mental assessments and everything, and it did take a lot of the day, but most of my day was not spent with clients. So I feel like because of that, I was able to just, put on the professional stuff and just get through it, and have, I had some good discussions too, but yeah, I feel like my coworkers would have just noticed, like, once I'm back with just them, I was like really quiet and like just, it's like super flat and just just not very energetic. So I feel like it would have come out more just with them. Like, yeah, being able to see the fatigue start to get on me.
So one of the ways you really kind of coped with the stress was to do a little bit of isolation by not being as verbal.
Mm-hmm. Man, yep. You hit that right on.
How about you, Angel or Ashley?
I feel like Angel and I are the slackers today.
Oh.
So I feel like I'm self-aware about it, but this is going to sound like I'm in denial, so I'm going to just say that. As much, and I know this is not about the book, but I know y'all know I gave Julius a very hard time in that book of how he kind of consumed, his life was consumed by what he done. And it's funny to me because, especially when I first started, I wanted to be everything and anything to anybody that I worked with.
Wow.
So I felt like I was young and I had just got out of school, and I needed to prove that I was just as competent as the 40, 50-year-olds that I was working with at my first job. So the way that kind of evolved was that I had no personal life. If I had no boundaries, that if in the sense that if they called me, I went right then. No matter if it was 9 or 10 o'clock at night, if it was stuff, it was a residential treatment program. So if it was stuff that staff should have been dealing with and could have, the house staff, if they didn't want to deal with it, they knew they could call me and I would be right there and I would deal with it. And that was not my role to do that. So, I didn't really see a problem with it because I thought I was just doing what I was supposed to do because I was helping people or trying to help people. But my husband and my mother seem to be the two people that try to keep me in line. And they kind of kept giving me a hard time about, this is not okay. I would be on vacation. They would call. I would answer. It's not very good for your outside relationships to be like that. So I left that job, and I'd say while I never felt like I was really burned out, I mean, I had everyday stress, and it was difficult, the things that these kids were going through, because it makes you feel like if you've not experienced those things in your childhood, that you lived a very sheltered life by some of the things that they've experienced. And y'all being involved with DCS, you can only imagine what those things are. And so, but I felt like it was almost a challenge for me to get through it. but I know what my triggers now are. And I still feel the same way. I still want to help as much as I can. And I have problems saying no, but I have a better way of setting the expectations up front than what I did in that first job. But I can tell days where I'm just fed up with it because it's like what I do doesn't bring me joy that day. Every person I see, that if any other day I would see them, it would be fine. And I would enjoy the visit, and it could be exactly the same, and I would be okay with it. But that day, it's like my tolerance level is a lot shorter, and I just want to get through it. And those are days that I know I need to do something for myself. Whether it's massage, take a walk, not answer the phone, whatever. Those are some of the symptoms that I see of burnout, and I try to keep it in check. But I'd say since that first job, I don't have as much of my mother and my husband fussing at me about boundaries.
So I think kind of what I heard you saying, if I'm correct,
It was a lot, I know.
is when you first started off, you had no boundaries. You were superwoman. I'm going to prove all of these people that I'm just as good, if not a lot better. You were really kind of struggling, even though you didn't realize it, with separating your family life from your professional life. And while you thought that you were doing the right thing, those who loved you were really trying to let you know how it was affecting you from their viewpoint and how it was maybe putting some stressors on relationships. But from there, you have started to really recognize where you have created those boundaries in the beginning. And a trigger for you to see where your burnout mode is I'm running out of niceness. That means I need to step away.
Yeah, when the niceness tank is empty, it is not a good situation for anybody.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that. Does anybody else have any questions for her or statements about that? You can relate a little bit.
I feel like social work in general is just a job that it can definitely, if you have a passion for it, that it can consume you because people's problems don't stop.
Yes.
And I think because of all the stuff that we hear, that's where a lot of that comes from, because I think that people get into this profession thinking it's an easy job. We get paid to talk. And it is an easy physical job most of the time, but it is an emotionally draining job. You definitely have to kind of compartmentalize every aspect of your job, really.
To
Ashley,
say a little.
Who's
Go ahead.
coming into this thinking it's an easy?
Yeah, I don't.
I want to meet this person because
And
I
see
need to like slap some sense into this.
So this is a side note, and y'all can critique it if you want to. And I know I've mentioned it maybe to Sam. But so my sister-in-law finished the graduate program earlier, and she changed to the social work profession from respiratory therapy because she thought that it was a lucrative business and easy. And I don't know what I did to make it look so lucrative and easy, but apparently she's been in her first job for two or 3 months now. And she works for a community mental health agency. And I think she's finding out it's not that easy.
Or lucrative.
or lucrative at all. But so now she's looking for other jobs.
Is she in a
Still-
nonprofit organization?
And I thought, if you're already making this now, and they're going to pay her school off in 5 years, suck it up for 5 years and be done with it.
Preach.
So every time that I think about that, and I do, I mean, I feel like my family overall, except for my close family, feel like this is an easy job, and that I truly do get paid to talk. I take babies, put people in nursing homes, and I talk to people. That's what I do.
You know what? Go ahead, Paige.
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
No, please.
Yeah.
It's a lot, Paige. You can say it.
Misunderstanding.
I say we just refer people to the Joker and tell them to watch the movie and say, this is what we deal with.
The new Joker movie?
Yes. This is what we deal with.
Yes.
It is not easy.
Did you all ever see the show back in the 90s called Judging Amy?
It sounds familiar, but I never saw it.
It was a television show about a lady who was a social worker, and her daughter was a judge. And it was very interesting. If you all love Netflix and stuff like that, and you're really into social work, well, because I actually like to watch certain shows that I feel like I can relate to. That's a really good show where you can relate to.
All right, I just looked it up.
It's a really good show. Angel, did you have any reflections or anything you wanted to add about?
I had the second hand
Okay.
that you're talking about. Whenever I worked at Life and Health, there's a nurse there, and she had worked there for a long time. We'll say anywhere between 8 to 10 years. To me, that's a long time to deal with addiction stuff. And it was just like, to her, every patient was a liar. Every patient could go without their medication-assisted treatment for 3 days. If she didn't feel like getting the medicine called in, it didn't matter. They'd be fine for 72 hours. And it's just like, she did not care about how she made them feel. I mean, all of her empathy was gone. So me and her constantly did this right here, because I'm like all gung-ho about helping these poor people that made a horrible choice and now their life is in shambles. And she's the person that's like, they did it to themselves. They did it to themselves. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, man, when karma or life, however you want to look at it, comes back and bites you in the butt, you're going to think about this. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we constantly had the head-to-head fights, because I'd be like, so-and-so says you've not called their medicine in. They're freaking out. It's triggering them. They're wondering if they're going to need to go find something else since you're not calling in their medication that they're legally supposed to have. And so she'd be like, well, they can go without it. It's okay. I mean, they'll be fine without it. Did not care how it was bothering their psychological. So that was
Do you ever say anything to her about, like, you kind of suck right now?
Well, I would say stuff like, why don't you care how these people feel? I mean, they're somebody's child. They're somebody's possibly mom, sister, brother, whatever. They're somebody. So whether you agree with, looking for treatment or not, you're here supporting it because you work here. So if you're not for medication-assisted treatment, then you don't need to be here. So, yeah, we went head-to-head.
Well, and Angel, I appreciate you giving that example. And again, it seems like a oh my gosh situation, but it's a really good example of that secondhand compassion fatigue, of observing that about somebody, and I think it also shows how much we give of ourselves in this profession, and the challenges that we face and how cognizant we need to be, even personally, and how do we support our peers so that if they need to step away, then that needs to happen, because it's not about us, it's about it's about taking care of our patient. So I applaud you for stepping in. When you
it didn't do any good, because she'd been there for so long that the doctor that owned the business supported her because she'd been there for so long. But day after day after day, clients would complain about how she made them feel. They would come in to me for case management and be like, I had to see Jessica today and she didn't call my medicine in on Friday, so my drug screen's going to be bad today because she wanted me to go all weekend without it. And I'm like, well, at least you're coming in and telling me the truth. I mean, I can't applaud you for that. But then it would turn around and somehow the doctor would, take her side and just be like, you guys failed the drug screen. Well, yeah, no crap. My meds weren't called in and I'm a recovering addict. What do you expect from me? So, but I did, and it wasn't bad, and everybody there could feel the tension, but I was like, it wasn't fair. So.
And see, I think it's sad that there's certain areas that it's like people will, they have a lot of stigmas attached to it, like the ones in recovery and things like that, but it's like their problems are less than, when really they're probably pretty important, and you know that you're working with this population, so why are you not more understanding of their issue?
Yeah, if you don't like drug addicts or people recovering from addiction, then you definitely don't need to work at a facility that supports their recovery.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be one of those people. To me, whenever they would come in and say I was without my medicine, to me it was like, okay, you've been working on getting your kids back, and now because she couldn't do her job, there's a possibility you're going to fail for DCS, and then, is your kids going to be given back to you? Or are they going to be taken away? What is going to happen here because she didn't do her job?
But I almost bet that she had the mentality of, oh, they're druggies, so it's not really
exactly. That's exactly how she had it.
Yeah. People
yeah.
suck.
People do suck. And I would get fired up, mad, and I'd be like going head to head with her every single day if I had to. Didn't get anywhere, but it's okay.
A for effort.
Yeah, I tried.
Yeah, and Angel, and I would almost venture to say, because I can definitely recognize a little bit of myself in you with that. Not a little, a lot. Because, reminding others of why you got into this, and that if you're no longer effective and no longer able to be compassionate, then maybe you need to look for something else that is more appropriate for where you are in life.
Mm-hmm.
So, I applaud you for that and for sharing that, because I think, again, we can all relate to bits and pieces of that, no matter where we are in our time frame of social work career. I think we have the gamut of people who are brand new at this, and those that have been in it for quite a long time. So I think we all have something we can gain and glean, because if we're not observing and hearing what people have to say, then maybe the next person will keep quiet when something could have really gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can see something quicker and recognize that and be able to point someone in the right direction so that they don't go down the wrong road, or even recognize that within themselves. Would you all agree?
Mm-hmm.
So I did hear Ashley earlier talk about how she already recognizes compassion fatigue in herself and burnout, and how she is able to kind of put that in abeyance. What are some things that you all do, and not necessarily just in social work, because again, it's burnout and compassion fatigue can happen across your entire life, and in all aspects of it. So what are some things that you all do, or that you all would recommend to each other, that would be supportive of either preventing it or kind of walking back from it when you realize that you've gotten into that burnout mode?
Take your PTO. They give it to you for a reason. Take it. If you have to call in sick, take your sick days. Take a mental health day. You have those for a reason. Like, yeah, you can accrue it for a nice vacation and all, but some days you just need a day off. And that's what got me through mine, honestly. If I didn't take those days off, then I would have probably had a mental breakdown. And taking those days off, I recovered and I was able to get back to work and get going.
I think it's awesome that you mentioned that, Sam, because I've always made the joke that I can't ever donate my hours to anybody because I never have like the required amount that you should before you can donate it to somebody. Because I believe strongly in, I'm not saving up 80 hours of PTO. That's just not, and it's not that I don't like to work. I do. I enjoy it. But I know I will kill somebody if I do not have a break every once in a while. So, and especially with school, I feel like I almost use my PTO more so for school crap than, than anything right now. But I think it's awesome that you mentioned that because that is definitely a very good piece of advice, Sam.
Thank you.
Don't bank your PTO.
Seriously.
Do you all ever ask your peers for help? And Ashley, I know that you mentioned earlier about in your example that you felt like Superwoman, and then it became I have to be Superwoman because I put myself in this position. But have you all ever had the feeling of support? And Samantha, you said that you didn't feel this before, but were you all able to ask for help, or did you, reflecting back, you could have asked for help and you didn't?
See, from my situation, I have no problem asking for help, but my peers weren't able to give me the support that I needed because the case was beyond them.
Okay.
And my supervisor wanted to do things her own way, and it was not right for that family. And every time she did things her own way, it just made things worse. And it made more work for me. Everything just, every possible way it could get worse, it got worse. And I had to escalate it to the director, and the director took the side of my supervisor, and it just was not. So I didn't have the support of the leadership that I needed. I had the support from my peers, but they just couldn't, like, all our hands were tied. So, but I have no problem going for help. Like, I think that besides taking your PTO, having coworkers that you can go to and talk to, even if it's just to bitch about work, call them after work and bitch about work. Like, get it off your chest.
Yes.
I think that's, don't do it at work though, because you'll get in trouble.
I like what you said about get it off your chest. And so did you feel like getting it off your chest, it kind of relieved some of that steam, like, you know, a steam engine, you have to let it off so that it doesn't combust?
Yeah.
And then you had the right amount of energy to take it back in and be professional.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that you had that support and that you recognized to reach out to them, even if it didn't reach the resolution you would have preferred, that you do realize that that's a positive thing, or it can be a positive thing. And hopefully you've had other situations where you were able to reach out and receive the right kind of support.
Yeah.
And we only talked about a few things that would be helpful, but I think those are huge. Asking for peer support, supervision, taking your time off so that you can have your personal time to even reflect on, is this the best place for me to stay? It is, I just need a break to recharge my batteries, kind of thing. Do you all have any others that you would like to state or to ask? And Paige, you're a little bit newer at this, so because you are newer than some of us, what are your thoughts on what you've heard today as far as burnout and how to kind of not avoid it, but to recognize when it's happening and to mitigate it?
Mm-hmm. I think there are a lot of good points. When you guys were talking about getting support from coworkers and stuff, and like being the superhero, I was like, oh, I immediately thought of my my current internship. Like, it's not that extreme, but I'm just noticing the beginnings of that. Like, and I don't even feel like I need to like do a lot, but I do have a huge problem asking, like bothering, like I feel like I'm bothering people when I ask questions and stuff, and that's still something I'm having to work through because like asking questions and asking for help is part of doing your job sometimes. But I think because of that, I tend to kind of just, do things myself, or like help other people too much, kind of thing. I don't know. So I think that was a good thing that you guys mentioned. So I need to be careful of that. But yeah, as far as general self-care, I forget my other point. I don't know. But hearing what you guys do is helpful, because yeah, it's all very new, but yeah.
And do you all think it's important, and I think Angel recognized this, but recognizing when your peers are struggling with burnout, and hopefully having an environment where you can say, hey, you seem like you're really struggling today. Is there anything that I can do?
The thing with this person, there was no helping her because it was too far gone. Because at first, that's how it was. I was like, hey, you kind of act like you're not feeling well today. And, but the more I got to know her and how she was with the patients, feeling good or bad had nothing to do with it. She could be in a great mood and just screw someone over that was a patient and not think twice about it.
Yeah. And I think that reflects back also to what we discussed earlier, with there only being about 7.5 years in the social work field post-masters. And, that's the median amount of time, and some are in it longer than they should be, per Angel's description. And there are some who are so excited when they come on board, and then they see others who are no longer open to being compassionate, and I think that can kind of limit what they feel they can do as far as asking for support. So to me, when you're looking at compassion fatigue, you have to look at it from both sides of the coin, of observing it and how that affects others, and being cognizant of it so that you can express yourself and be a support. Does that make sense?
Well, and I think especially when you were talking about being supportive of your peers, there will be some peers that they will drain you because they don't want solutions, or they don't want to just vent and move on. They want to revel in the yuck and the misery, in a sense. And I think being a part of that and constantly kind of being on this hamster wheel of trying to fix them or improve their situation, I think that can cause burnout with our jobs too, because you don't have the energy for all of it.
I agree. Would you all agree with her statement?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great session tonight. I really appreciate it. You all had some really good statements, and I feel like we all have a lot of the same belief systems as far as the social work goes. That we are passionate about helping others, but we do recognize that this is something that we want to do for the rest of our lives. And so I think this was a good conversation to have about being very cognizant of where we are and taking those times, like Samantha said, take your PTO. So before we end tonight, I just have a really quick one more video to show. It's just a couple minutes, and then we should be done. It's just a really quick tips on dealing with stress and burnout in the social work field. So I'm going to share my screen one more time. Hopefully I will do this the right way this time. Share. And I think I've already got it optimized the way it should be. So you all will let me know if you do not hear this. Oh. Can you all see it? Can you all see this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. Okay. Can you all hear it?
Yeah.
I'm going to back it up really quick. Sorry, guys. What do you think about that video? Just a real quick.
I like that it included things that we already talked about.
Yes. Superwoman Ashley. Supervision Samantha.
Yes.
And taking that time to yourself. Well, unless you all have anything else, I appreciate your input and your great support and sharing with each other. Do you all have any questions? All right, I am going to